Introducing National Streaming Sports, live and on-demand sports talk programming that you can access 24/7. For the premier sports talk experience, tap into our Roku channel. Start your mornings with Mac and Jack covering all the weekend sports action. Then pour a cup and enjoy all the sports you can drink on the Coffee and Sports podcast. At midday, talk sports from east to west on the Coast to Coast podcast. Followed at night by some hot girl talk with Prim and Proper Sports featuring Sonia Pearson. Talk boxing on the Gloved Fist. Yankee fans tune in for Start Spreading the News. And there's more on the College Sports Huddle and Sports Scope with Robert Butler. There are 20 podcasts in all and 70 weekly shows giving us a 3.4-star viewer rating. To find us on Roku TV, search for National Streaming Sports on the Roku search bar. Click on the logo and you're in. National Streaming Sports, live and on-demand sports talk for America.
Welcome to Glove Fist. Yes, Jack, and we're back. My name is Frank Latierzo, part-time writer, full-time observer, joined by former six-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America, Jack Hurst. And Jack, you were away last week. There's a few things to talk about. Did the BWA hand out their awards yet? I think I read something on Sweet Science.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Frank. It's April 30th, okay? It's going to be 9 days from today. It's going to be at the Edison Ballroom in Manhattan, April 30th, 2 days before the big Times Square show. Alexander Usyk, the 2024 Fight of the Year, is going to be there.
That's pretty cool.
He is confirmed to be there through his manager, Igis Klimas, who's the manager of the year. Igis is one of the finest gentlemen in boxing. You know, his word is like gold, and Usyk is going to be there. Gabriel Fondura, the female fighter of the year, is going to be there. Michael Spinks is coming as a guest. Nonito Donaire. It's the 100th, anniversary of the BWAA dinner.
Right.
100th anniversary.
And I saw the awards, and it's all the same suspects as usual. The guys, all they have to do is put their byline on their article, and they win. So
that's separate. That's the Bernie's, the writing contest.
Yeah, so, no excitement there. We know who's going to win the awards before they're even written.
The Bernies have been frustrating because before this year I got an honorable mention, but 3 of the last 4 years I had second place finishes. I can't get over the top.
Jack, who did you finish second to?
Well, 1 year I didn't get a good deal. Greg Bishop of Sports Illustrated. I should have won investigative category. I wrote a story, The Demise of the New York Golden Gloves, a whole big investigative piece. He did something on Clifford Etienne, something to the effect.
Oh my God!
The topic didn't compare.
And who were the other writers?
And I'm not saying I'm as good a writer, as the guy, but whatever. No one wants to hear about me coming up short. They want to hear about the fighters who are coming up short. And one of
Jack,
the fighters,
but who votes on who wins the awards?
It's a fair vote as far as I'm concerned. The guys who vote don't see the bylines, but
I find that, Jack, I believe you, but I have a hard time believing that.
Wait. But I'm going to say this before I tell you the panel. Everyone reads Sports Illustrated, or most people read it, okay? So they're going to know who wrote a certain article. And other people aren't going to read my article. It's not in Sports Illustrated, so they're going to know what a great writer who wrote the other story did.
So you just told me everything I need to know.
This is no. You have Bernie Fernandez, Ron Borges, Wally Matthews, Tony Page. They're like 4 of the judges that pop off the top of my head this past year.
All right. Well, I can vouch for 2 of them. I won't say who they are, but I can vouch for 2 of them.
Okay. Hey, Frank, this is boring stuff. People want to hear about the fighters.
I think it's exciting stuff, and they'd rather hear that.
but on the record, I vouch for the BWAA. It's a great organization. I don't agree with you when it comes to the BWAA, as far as that goes. Even though there are a few guys in the BWAA, at least a couple very high profile guys who they don't have the greatest moral character in my view. I wouldn't say who they are, but the honesty of the organization, I do vouch for that.
Jack, I'll go with that. But my problem is with that, I think it's an all boys, cool kids club, like many things. And I just don't think a lot of guys that are lesser known get a fair shot, because I've been reading a lot of content lately, and some of this stuff I see winning, I'm thinking like, I can't believe that actually got first place. That's just me.
There have been years where I was baffled, where I turned in some really great stories and it came up completely flat. So,
But Jack, but let me add this to that. Let me add this to what I said. Even though I feel that a lot of the work as far as insight lacks in today's boxing world, Jack, I don't really think good writing or insightful content is appreciated. I really don't think that it is. Not like it used to be when you and I were growing up and falling in love with this sport. That said, go ahead.
No, I got to tell you something funny. I don't know whether I mentioned this on our show or I did it on the Mac and Jack show. I got an old-time book when I was down here in Florida, an old-time boxing book that printed different stories of the old-time writers during the time of Jimmy Cannon, a bunch of them. And I'm reading this stuff, and I'm going, darn it, these guys are much better than me. I mean, this is great writing. And now I'm starting to think, can you imagine we compare the old-time fighters, the 40s and 50s, and the guys today could somehow go to a gym. Let's say we take them in a time capsule. The top guys today, we take them to Stillman's gym in the 1940s, and they get run out of the ring, the guys like today.
Right. Fair point. Again, that's just me, but, maybe I'm just a crotchety old man. But look, you were gone last week. I had a friend of mine in, Jim Kurtz, who has a boxing company that he's partnered with. They have maybe 10 guys under their umbrella. One of the guys is fighting on the Inouye card Sunday night, not this Sunday. I think it's May 2nd. So, yes, you were missed, but Jim did a good job. He and I discussed, what did we discuss? We discussed the Boots fight. Before we go on to my favorite fighter, Ryan Garcia, whose suspension comes due this week, or it's over. I know you saw the Boots fight. Just give me a quick take.
I mean, Boots looked great. I thought Boots would win like around an 11th round stoppage. I thought he'd be up something like 8-2. I thought he would win decisively by a stoppage, a methodical beating. He was better than I thought he'd be even. Okay? So Boots was near perfect. I mean, the only thing I didn't like about Boots, he does get hit. And that kind of bothers me a little bit. Now, he just shakes off the blows very quickly. They land, they have no effect on him. But I don't like that, to see Boots. And he gets hit with single shots. He doesn't get hit with combinations. But he does get hit a little more than he should, maybe because he's so overpowering. And
that's it, Jack.
Yeah, and he was looking to make a statement and was willing to take 1 to land 5 from his end, and get the job done. I can understand it, but sometimes these habits could carry over and to a little bit higher level of competition. You wonder if you put him in with a prime Terence Crawford, a guy who could really fire back with bad intentions, multiple shots, one after the other, and isn't going to be hit that much by Boots. You kind of wonder. But this version of Terence Crawford, look, I don't think he ever fights Boots,
No, they'll never fight.
If he loses to Canelo and comes down in weight, it won't be the same Crawford. It'll be a statement fight for Boots if that happened.
Jack, Boots gets hit but I have two things on that. One, he gets hit because, like Leonard, like Hearns, like Crawford, he's looking to win by knockout and do damage and hurt his opponent. And in order to do that, you can't lay back and counter like Mayweather or Whitaker. You have to be assertive. And if you're assertive, I don't care who you are, you're going to be hit. What bothers me is I see in Boots, I'm not sure he has a great chin, and I see some of the shots do bother him. I don't think he has like a Hagler-like chin. That could be a little bit of concern, but for what's out there at the top level, I don't think anybody at 47 or 54 touches him. If Crawford came back to 54, I would pick Crawford to beat him. But as you said, they're never going to fight. So I look forward to Boots' next fight. I think he's going to be the betting favorite, whoever he fights for the next couple of years. We'll see about that. But talk about
Frank,
my
you gave me a
favorite.
great idea. Before we get into Ryan Garcia, I have a homework assignment for you, Frank, because you gave me a great idea. You specialize and you beat it to death on the swarmers. You love the swarmers. You keep talking about the swarmers, and you do a good job with it. So kudos to you. But I have a new category that I think you like. Okay, I do come up with them once in a while, like the coolest fighters ever. You like that when I came up, Sugar Ray and Smoke and Joe. This one is up your alley, perfect, and no one can do it better than you, including me. The shutdown fighters. There are very few fighters who shut opponents down. It's not their attack. Two of them come to mind in Mayweather and Whitaker. They shut guys down. That's what they specialized in. Okay? It doesn't mean they would have shut down the greatest of the great. That's
Right.
Well debatable. How many fighters, we got to think throughout history, were strictly shut down artists, nothing else. That's what Mayweather is. It's not his offensive attack. He just shuts down an opponent. And
we'll do that, Jack. But two came to my mind as soon as you said that, and they weren't until you named. So I can add them to the mix. Bernard Hopkins, Andre Ward.
Didn't Andre Ward fight a little more wide openly than them? Hopkins, I see, is a shutdown type guy. He shut you down moving forward. Whitaker.
I think Bernard and Andre are a lot alike. And even though Ward is a great counterpuncher, I think he's another guy that can take away whatever your best weapon is.
Okay, just a thought, and Ali was too versatile. Of course, you could say Ali shut you down the first coming with his movement, but that was different. I'm not talking about a guy who jabs and moves just. It's in his attack. But okay.
Would you consider Jimmy Young that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Jimmy Young at his best would shut a guy down.
And Chris Bird.
Right, Chris, but they wouldn't dazzle you with combinations of blows and flurries. They just, in a subtle way, they just shut
They get you out of position where you can't do nothing, and they can do a little bit to win rounds.
A little bit, yeah. You do nothing at all. They're doing a little bit, and they're keeping ahead.
And they win rounds.
Absolutely, yeah. I just thought.
What's Ryan Garcia, Jack? He's not a shutdown fighter.
No, Ryan Garcia, I'm going to tell you, the 1 year off, I don't know how dedicated Ryan Garcia is away from the gym. I have to assume he's worked hard. I have to assume that, and the first fight when he was acting erratically, you thought it was an act. I didn't think it was an act. I just thought Ryan Garcia's young, flaky, whatever. I don't think he has a bad heart. He's not a criminal getting into, problems outside the ring. And, he's returning after the 1 year suspension. I have a problem with the steroid use, as you do. I didn't have a problem with him coming in overweight and Haney saying, well, I made the weight, you didn't. You thought it was unprofessional. I thought it was warfare because Bill Haney was talking about his son wanting, killing Garcia. He says, look, I'm sending him out to kill Garcia. Do what you have to do. When you do that, that crosses a line. When you say you want to kill a guy, take his life, you might say, Frank, it's just to get inside his head, this and that. Maybe it's so, but there's got to be a stopping point, Frank. There's got to be a stopping point of things that you just can't say. Otherwise, everything goes. What are we going to hear next? If one of the fighters has a kid who has issues and the opponent mocks fun at the kid because he wants to gain a psychological edge, that shouldn't be allowed in play. Can you imagine,
Jack?
Frank? This was before the Super Bowl at a press conference, and they said these things.
Football is a little bit of a different game, though, Jack. The intent isn't to go out there and hurt the guy. I mean, the linebackers want to put the quarterback out of the game. I understand that. I disagree with you regarding Haney. I don't care what anybody says, what any athlete says, what any fighter says. Their words, they can't hurt. What Garcia did by coming in over the weight against the guy who killed himself to make weight. And there was a great article on Boxing Scene by Timothy Bradley about what he went through to make weight a few times. And I have much more of a problem and find more fault with Ryan Garcia's behavior than I did Haney's behavior. But Jack, it just goes to show, I'm looking at the schedule now, and Ryan Garcia, of that 3-bout card that has Garcia, Haney, and Teofimo Lopez. And remember, of those guys, Lopez has the best win, but yet Ryan Garcia is the main event.
Ryan Garcia is the biggest name. We have to look at all the big names. Teofimo is a nice name, but Teofimo never took off like the star he should have been after he beat Lomachenko.
Well, he wasted that win. There's no doubt about that.
I mean, yeah, and the way he was promoted.
And then he lost.
And then he lost to Kambosos. It all, was bad. He should have been one of the big stars in boxing. The question also and Devin Haney by now, I thought was going to be, I said he was going to be a generational talent in the sense I thought he was going to be kind of like another Pernell Whitaker, if not as good as Pernell in that category that you could talk, when you talked about great fighters and going forward, Devin Haney's name was going to come up when all was said and done. And I know you're saying, well, there's still possibly time for that to be done. Nah, he might win a couple of more titles. I'm not saying he won't.
No, I think that ship sailed, Jack. That's not going to happen. And we don't know what he has because he has not fought yet since the Garcia fight. And I'm sorry, even though Garcia came in overweight and maybe there was some illegal substance that helped his performance, the bottom line is Haney still was defeated and beaten up in that fight. And we don't know what kind of baggage that's going to carry.
Right. But getting back with the weight, Haney didn't have to accept the extra money and go through it to fight. Garcia came in 3.5 pounds over the weight. Haney could have said, no, I'm not fighting. You didn't make weight. What happened in the rematch that was supposed to take place with Michael Spinks and Eddie Mustafa Muhammad? Michael Spinks didn't go through with the fight. His trainer, Eddie Futch, said, look, you work to make weight. He didn't. Mustafa Muhammad's going to be in a good frame of mind, strong. I don't have a good feeling about this. And they didn't take the fight. Okay? He could have done.
Well, that was smart management on Spinks' part.
But the Haneys wanted the extra money. They were so arrogant and sure they'd beat Garcia. Okay, so he has the 3.5 pounds. We'll beat him. We'll get the extra money. But once you accept the extra money, don't come back and complain about it later. Okay.
See, or maybe you do that, Jack, so you have the excuse.
Fighters always.
He could have that. That could have been his parachute too. And if he wins, he looks even better because he beat him when he came in over the weight. And if he loses, he can always put that out there that was the reason why. If I'm you, if it's me, I'm going to do what Spinks did for all the reasons that Eddie Futch said. But they didn't. We see what happened. But at the end of the day, Jack, he's still undefeated, Haney.
Yeah. But it's ironic. Garcia's making excuses. Well, I lost to Tank Davis because I had to make weight and get all the way down there. It wasn't my natural weight class. Tough luck. You shouldn't have signed for the darn fight if you can't make weight.
Notice he didn't ask for a rematch, though.
You don't get a free pass, when you lose a fight. No one really should care at the end. Listen, I'll give you an idea. Another with cheating and so on. Jose Luis Castillo for his rematch with Diego Corrales. came in. It seemed deliberately over the weight. He's saying his body could no longer make weight. Okay, maybe he legitimately couldn't make weight, but the feeling was he didn't try to make weight. But if I'm Jose Luis Castillo, I'm thinking I had that fight with Corrales won. He intentionally spit out his mouthpiece twice in the 10th round when he was down to give himself extra. Otherwise, I would have won the fight, and that's cheating. That's my rationale. He cheated, manipulated the rules. If he manipulated the rules, I'm going to get away with what I can get away with.
Jack, at that level, that happens. Did you ever hear of the channel? It's called the Vice channel.
No.
Okay. They just, a couple months ago, they did a special where, who was it, Belichick or Brady? They did a special, why was Brady, then why was Belichick? And then the third one, they brought the experts in and they decided, they made their choice. They're doing a thing now, it's called Grudge. And they've only done 4. Kobe and Shaq, Clemens and Piazza, Favre and Rodgers, and the Red Wings and the Avalanche. And I watched all 4 over the weekend. And it harkens back to what you said, Jack. When it's a rivalry and the world is watching and there's so much on the line, whether it's legacy or money, the guys at that level, Jack, they'll take whatever they can get. And I think that just flows all the way down to all the sports at the elite level. They'll take whatever advantage they can get. Castillo did it. Corrales did it in the first fight. And Mayweather did it against Marquez, but he got away with it. And like, sometimes it's worth the money. Mayweather was fine, but he knew that. Pardon me?
What did Mayweather do against Marquez?
He came in over 144 and paid the fine. He came in at 146. It was a catchweight fight, but he knew Marquez wasn't going to go anywhere because it was the biggest payday of his career.
Okay, well, but Marquez didn't have to. Marquez, I never recall him complaining about the weight.
He never did. Fight. Well, no, right. I think he mentioned a little bit afterwards.
Fine,
but he got paid.
Fine. But that's fine if Haney didn't complain about the weight. That's fine. Good. But complaining about the steroid use is another thing. You know, there's no way to know a guy tests positive, okay? If you're clean and someone else isn't, you have every right to complain because you went into the fight, you know, not knowing that. But the result was overturned. So in a certain sense, you got justice as far as your record went. Haney's still unbeaten. But let's be honest about it, Frank. Emotionally, we think of it as a Garcia win and a Haney loss. That's our mindset. That's my mindset.
He may be undefeated, Jack, but we saw him get beat physically, and that didn't leave him.
Same thing like with the Bo Galata fight. Bo won both fights by disqualification. But emotionally, we remember Galata beat him up twice. That's our mindset, you know? And I think the records aren't that important in those situations. I think records are only important at the end of someone's career. You could say, well, they're unbeaten, this or that. But I don't think when they're fighting, records mean much. I think people forget. Even Tyson Douglas, if they were able to overturn that, fortunately they weren't. We would have remembered Tyson, you know, getting exposed in that fight, you know.
Absolutely.
But with Garcia, all the guys on that Times Square show, I think he has the easiest fight with Rolly Romero. They supposedly sparred a lot. Romero has a so-so chin. The only thing Romero has going for him, he can punch a bit.
He's got a good left hook.
And he was competitive with Tank Davis till he got nailed in the 7th round. It really was a close fight. He fought the fight of his life. I think he got inside Tank's head a little bit with all his bold talk. You know, I know you might think, how can you get inside of Tank Davis's head? But I think Tank was.
He's only human, Jack. Of course you can get inside his head.
Yeah.
Jack, of those 3 fights, Garcia, Romero, Haney, Ramirez, and Lopez Barboza. Now, look, full disclosure, I haven't seen a whole lot of Barboza enough to go totally out on that fight as far as where he ranks of the three of them. But I think that Haney, and I'm talking the opponents, I think that Haney, I know Ramirez may be a little long in the tooth, but I think his style might give Haney trouble, and I think he has the toughest night in front of him.
Well, I think the fighter who can make the biggest statement of all of them would be Haney. Okay? Garcia is expected to beat Romero, Raleigh Romero.
He has to win by impressive knockout.
He's expected. So if he does it, he's doing what's expected. Barboza has 11 stoppages in 33 fights. That tells you enough that he's not a puncher. And we saw his fight with Jack Catterall. Close fight. He deserved the decision, but it was a close fight. And Lopez is more talented than Catterall, which Teofimo Lopez shows up. If he's a Teofimo of a few years ago, yeah, he's going to win, I think, with room to spare. And that's what I suspect is going to happen. Whether he stops Barboza or wins by decision, I'll come up with a more firm prediction next week before the fight. But I
think Lopez brings his A game, Jack. I'm confident to say that now. With the other two names on the card, I think there's a part of him that he knows he's probably auditioning against Garcia, and he wants to be the guy that's the talk of the night, not Garcia.
Haney needs to state a big statement in the worst way. If he wins a lackluster decision, it doesn't excite us as much for Garcia-Haney rematch. What would you rather see? Let's say all three of them win decisively. Would you rather see Garcia fight Haney or Lopez?
Lopez.
That's my feeling too. And it's a more intriguing fight because there's so much smack going on. I mean, by junk talk going on. A lot of it might actually be humorous. Somehow with the Haneys, who are Bill Haney, very abrasive when you listen to him. The talk beforehand, there'd be no fun talk. It would be more like bitterness going on, both ways. But somehow with Teofimo, he puts on a great act, and Garcia, I think, puts on a bit of an act himself. I think they'll trash talk us like we haven't heard before, and at the end of the fight, all will be good between the two of them.
No, Lopez. I want to see Lopez and Garcia. I'll predict that we won't see that, but I would like to see that because Lopez can hit. Garcia doesn't have his chin can be tested and dented, and they're both cocky, and they both know a loss would be very hard to come back from. That would almost be a crossroads fight in their careers, and that's why it will not happen. We might get Haney and Garcia rematch if they both win.
Frank, can you imagine in Vegas, they have the trifecta. You get odds if all three win. Raleigh Romero, Jose Luis Romero, and Arnold Barboza, the trifecta.
I mean, that might be something that you might put $50 or $100 down just for the heck of it, but I can't see. I can't see three upsets.
80 to 1, 100 to 1. I don't know.
Yeah, they could probably pay that.
But
who will be the biggest favorite that night? Lopez or Garcia?
No, Garcia easy. No. Teofimo's in with a live opponent.
Yeah.
Barboza is good. He can fight. Raleigh Romero is ordinary. Israel, I forgot who the fighter was. Oh boy, the Venezuelan fighter. Stopped him in 10 rounds. I think it was. Raleigh
I know who you mean. I can't think of his name.
No, Isaac Cruz. I'm sorry, Isaac Cruz.
Jack, who is televising that card?
It's a pay-per-view event. The Zone wants us to get the bundle. They said you get the Canelo fight the next day. Yeah, Canelo's fighting, William Skull. Who knows? But I'm going to tell you what's going to happen with one of these days with Canelo. And it is going to happen. If he's avoiding the top challenges, one of these days, one of these guys like a William Skull is going to turn up out of nowhere and beat him the way a Nino Benvenuti beat a Carlos Monzon. It's just going to happen. He's going to keep picking his spots, and one of these.
Well, he's going to have to get knocked out like Benvenuti did.
Well, no, he could lose on points. They get
They're not going to give
stable.
Canelo. They're not going to give a no-name a decision against Canelo.
It happens sooner or later. It catches up to all the greats.
All right.
They keep getting the decisions, and yeah.
Canelo's been pretty quiet. Crawford's been talking a lot. I love Terrence Crawford, Jack. I wish he fought more. I understand why he doesn't. This is such a. Go ahead,
Frank. I love this. I called one of my boxing friends. I needed to talk to him something business, and I make it clear: do not call me back between 7 and 8, no matter what. You call before
He just called you
7
back.
or after 8. Just call now. That's boxing. That's the mentality.
I've had
I'm
that
not gonna tell you who it
happen
is.
countless times.
A good guy, smart guy. I left a clear message. And what does he do? That's why I had to mute you for 1 second, Frank, where I was like a little shook up. And I sometimes genuinely get shook up over what you say, but that time I didn't know. I mean,
Jack, there's also a fight coming up this weekend that we haven't touched on lately. I'm not that excited about it, but it's big across the pond, and that's the Eubank Jr. Conor Benn fight. What's going through your mind there?
I'm excited about it, Frank. Why aren't you excited about it? You know, you're a true American, Frank. You should be an American.
I'm not ashamed of that.
No, but when you get, which is great. But when the fighters are outside of the United States, the only ones you give passes to would be like a Usyk or Fury, an elite heavyweight. I noticed that. Oh, no, the very elite couple of guys like Bivol and Beterbiev. Yeah, you'll give passes to those guys. And then
Jack, you know what it is with Benn and Eubank?
Guys are just very good fighters. You don't want to know from them if they're not American, Frank.
No, that's not true. You know what it is with Eubank and Conor Benn? I just don't think either of them are a player at the absolute elite level. And the fight to me means nothing worldwide because whoever wins, as soon as they step up, they're going to lose. But I know it's a big fight there. I know the history between the families, but it just doesn't get me going that much. But I'll go out on the limb, and I'm going to pick Eubank to win a decision.
You're right on this point. If their names were not Eubank and Benn, they wouldn't be an attraction like that. But it happens all the time.
I understand that.
When you have a famous family name, you always link to that name. There are rare exceptions. In Boca Raton, who I had a chance to sit down with, the Starbucks, Corey Spinks. Corey Spinks, even though we know he's Leon's son, Michael's nephew, we don't think of him that way. We think of him independent. He's not he's not on their coattails at all. He didn't get anything by being a Spinks, I feel, I mean, maybe he was recognized in the beginning, but no one thinks of him, Leon's son, this and that. I mean, he earned everything. Ben has kind of, he's piggybacked on his dad's name. They piggybacked on the rivalry that dads had, a bitter rivalry, maybe the greatest rivalry in British boxing history, perhaps.
It's in the conversation.
Right. I'd have to start thinking, you had Fratch, you had Groves, you had, some others. If I have
that super middleweight lot back then.
Right. But it was such a great rivalry. In a way, it gives us a chance. Hi, Little Holmes. That's some name, Little Holmes. I mean, that's
that man right there, Jack, is the biggest Larry Holmes fan on the planet. Hello there, sir.
I would have been able to guess that with the name Holmes there. But by the way, Floyd Mayweather said Larry
never
Holmes
heard of him.
Greatest heavyweight champion of all time. That's who gets his vote. Okay?
It's funny. Now think about that. Why would Floyd say that? He would say that because Holmes is a guy that's never going to overshadow him. Holmes was not a superstar. He was more of a workman-like guy, but yet Floyd could look at him as a fighter and appreciate his technical prowess, his jab, his fundamentals, and how good he was. So it's not like if Floyd says Ali or Tyson or Foreman, they're huge stars. That adds to their aura. He may be a little insecure about that. Larry Holmes, picking him is actually there's a motive for that. I'm not sure if Floyd really believes that. And I think I saw his top 5, and he had Holmes as the best heavyweight.
Yeah, you know what's coming out recently, and I heard even Stephen A. Smith alluded to this about Floyd maybe having money problems. Now, normally I don't like to talk about something like this with fighters with their money. It's heartbreaking if a guy loses his money. But I hope it doesn't happen to Mayweather. Don't get me wrong, not at all. I wouldn't snicker, smile. But the guy is always flaunting his money all the time, flaunting it. So now if people are talking about it, even De La Hoya was talking about it. I don't know whether you saw Oscar's Clapback Thursdays ever. I told you to check
I've seen
it out,
clips of it. I always forget to tune into it.
Oscar's funny. They do a funny presentation, I got to admit. So Oscar was alluding to it. Floyd owed money to a jeweler was suing him, or this or that. And Floyd is showing us this flock of cars and this, unless it's all an act and he didn't really.
Jack, a lot of people that have a lot of money are slow pay too. Some of my most wealthy friends, you know what? They're millionaires and they are called by bill collectors. So it seems that people with a lot of money, they don't like to part with it. It's just hard for me to believe a guy that's probably made close to $700 million could be broke. And I've been told that he's a good investor and he buys things that he can sell and get, cash value for. He buys high-end cars. He gets the unique ones that hold their value. I understand he has a lot of real estate. I don't think we'll see that happen.
Yeah, I hope not, but I'm just saying.
And he's tight with Warren Buffett, who I heard does give him financial advice.
Yeah, and I don't think he takes the advice if you're going to buy all those cars and this.
That could be.
But Frank Warren, super middleweight. The name escapes me the second. Who fought the draw with Carlos Adames? Okay, on that big show from Saudi Arabia. He's fighting my favorite fighter, Edgar Berlanga. Okay, they're going to be fighting, and it's actually a test, for Berlanga. Because Frank Warren had some big plans. Yeah, look that name up. It's just I'm having this brain cramp with that. But Frank Warren had big plans for this fighter before the Adames fight. And this fighter came up flat in that fight. Didn't show.
I remember I forget the fighter's name.
Right. But now he fights Berlanga. Berlanga lasting the distance with Canelo leads me to believe that Canelo might actually lose to William Skull, as crazy as it seems, because Berlanga can't fight. I mean, when I say can't fight on an elite level. That's what I mean. But if you want to tell me Berlanga's a little better than average, I'm good with that. But there's a big difference between being, a B student in a regular college and then wanting to go to Yale or Harvard, and say, I'm going to keep an A average.
Berlanga could be better off of that fight, though, Jack, because he didn't do bad in that fight. He had a couple of moments.
Well, in which fight? Against Canelo. But it shows me that Canelo, I thought this a few years ago, was declining. He kind of fought that off in the Charlo fight, which I thought he looked good in, actually, the Charlo fight. He got in good shape. Showed a lot of bounce. I know Jamel Charlo was a lot smaller, but regardless, I want to give credit to.
I disagree with him being a lot smaller, but I know what you're saying. And if Canelo's that guy against Crawford, there's a path for Crawford to beat him.
Let me tell you also, we talk about fighters with a feeling of entitlement, and I think one of the fighters who's starting to annoy me with a feeling of entitlement, believe it or not, would be David Benavidez. You get this feeling like he's owed all this. Okay?
Did you hear what Mike Tyson said about him?
He probably said he's a monster,
He said he's the best fighter in boxing.
Oh, that's fine.
I'm not
Maybe
saying
the
Tyson's right, but he really gave him high praise, and I don't know if they're good friends or not, but he's really blown away by him.
maybe he'll prove to be that. I think Benavides is genuinely top of the line. I do. Okay. And I might pick him to beat everyone if a matchup took place. Maybe I wouldn't, him against Beterbiev, Bival, etc. But the point is, for getting the WBC title, these unified titles are complete nonsense. Don't give them any credibility. Now we're hearing, oh, Usyk is fighting Daniel Dubois to unify the title. Like, what? Didn't Usyk unify? Didn't he beat
Usyk's
everyone
the
out
champ.
there? He beat Dubois. He beat Dubois. He's got to do it again. It's stupidity. Daniel Dubois, if he calls himself heavyweight champion, he's going to sound like he's going to sound like a clown. Anyone who calls Daniel Dubois the world champion, the legitimate world heavyweight champion, Dubois isn't a clown. The person saying it is a complete clown and then a complete fool.
Did you see? And it's funny you brought Usyk up because I've been having fun with a couple of my friends with him that are old school, hardcore modern boxing guys. Teddy Atlas ranked his top 10 heavyweights, and he held out number 6 spot for Usyk. And I teased a friend of mine who's a big Joe Louis and Muhammad Ali fan. I says, if Usyk retires undefeated, in the eyes of the younger fans, he's going to be nipping a lot closer at the heels of Ali and Joe Louis all-time ranking to these younger guys than you ever want to believe. But if he retires undefeated, he beats Dubois, and say maybe he fights one more time and he beats Parker and he ends up 25 or 26-0, Jack, there's going to be a case to put him in the top 10 because they're going to say, well, Holyfield, a lot of people have him in the top 10 all-time heavyweights, and he's not undefeated.
Well, numbers work against the modern fighter. You just used the number 25. I saw a post, who would win between Archie Moore and Michael Spinks? You can't compare the number of fights they had. That's what the problem is. If Archie Moore fought in Spinks' era, he would have had about the same number of fights. Maybe he wouldn't have been a touted Olympian, so he would have had to fight more in the beginning of his career. I don't know. But 25 fights, they would look at that, the number, and say, well, did he fight that much? Sugar Ray Leonard's kind of given a pass, not having
He covered a lot of ground in 40 fights.
Right. I mean, and we saw how great, the naked eye told us how great Sugar Ray Leonard was.
And I think the same applies to Michael Spinks, Jack. He had, 32 fights?
Yeah. Who did Teddy have third? I know he has Lewis 1, which is legitimate, no complaints, even though I have Ali first.
He had Lewis 1, Ali 2. I think he had Jack Johnson third.
Now, how does Johnson come number 3? What the heck did Johnson do?
Not in my mind.
Know that Matt Fleischer rated Johnson the greatest heavyweight champion of all time, but Matt Fleischer, rated all the old timers like that ahead. He had Joe Louis number 6. He had Bob Fitzsimmons, the 3rd greatest heavyweight of all time. When I was a kid, I called up the Ring Magazine offices and I got Matt Fleischer on the phone. I'd make a pest of myself. And I said, Nat, who do you think would have won a fight between Joe Louis and Bob Fitzsimmons? So Fleischer hesitated, actually, like he was never asked that question before. He says, I think it would have been a close fight, but I think Fitzsimmons would have edged him. Then I called Dan Daniel up, the associate editor, who is more of a modern guy, even though it's Fleischer's age. He said, don't listen to the old man. Louis would have murdered him.
And it's funny, Jack, think about it. Louis was in 72 when Fleischer put that list out. Louis had been retired a long time, so it's not like Fleischer didn't see him. Like
in 72.
In 72, Fleischer caught a lot of slack because he did not have Ali and Frazier in his top 10, but he didn't see their entire careers. So he kind of gets a pass there, but he saw all of Joe Louis.
Elisha passed away in June of 1972. He saw the best of Ali, pretty much. He didn't see Ali in Zaire but let me tell you, or the Thriller Manila, but let me tell you this. How would he be able to put Ali in the top 10? Because number 10 was Rocky Marciano, and you know how unpopular that would have been. So if he puts Ali in the top 10, Marciano had to exit. Fleischer's ratings were this. 1 Johnson, 2 Jim Jeffries. Jeffries was a dominant heavyweight champion. If you compare era to era, you could make an argument he belongs, that he was as dominant in his era as anyone, okay? Number 3, Bob Fitzsimmons, which doesn't make sense to me. Number 4, Jack Dempsey. Number 5, Jim Corbett. Number 6, Lewis. Number 7, Sam Langford. Number 8, Gene Tunney. Number 9, Max Schmeling. And number 10, Rocky Marciano. So you mean to tell me if he was going to slip anyone in the top 10 had he lived, Marciano would have to exit and he'd leave Schmeling in?
Well, that's what he said, Jack. He goes, what do I do? He goes, am I going to put Frazier there? He said he couldn't do that. And Ali lost, so he said he couldn't do that. But had he seen him beat Foreman, you could say Ali, his prime was 64 to 67, but he had his best wins in the 70s.
He had Sugar Ray Robinson rated not as a welterweight, as a middleweight, the 5th greatest middleweight in history.
And he had him what, 3rd or 4th at welterweight?
No, he didn't have him that high, as I recall. You'd have to check into that. I don't think he rated him as a welterweight altogether. I think he took a pass on that. I'm not certain.
Okay.
Okay.
Jack, here's my thing. And as I get older, I live and die by this more. Look, we saw the films of Joe Louis. We saw the films of Robinson. We saw the films of Marciano and Dempsey. We can talk about those guys thoroughly. But to me, Jack, if you didn't live through the era, and it's the same thing I go back to, you know, the guys that today think Mayweather was better than Ray Leonard, and they're the same guys that think LeBron was better than Jordan. And what I say to them is, you can't speak with impunity unless you live through both eras. I did. Leonard is clearly a grade above Mayweather, and I think Jordan, I don't think there's no GOAT debate to me between those two. It's Jordan, and then argue about who's number 2.
But there's 2 variables. There's peak value, and that's career-wise. Looking at
you can look at it that way too.
That's how Mayweather wants to look at it. Did I make the most money? Did I maximize my career better than their careers? That's how he wants to look at that. I could make this argument too if I'm talking about peak value. I could throw out something that's not crazy. You'll see the logic, even though you probably won't agree. I could say, and I'm playing devil's advocate, the greatest fighter of all time is Roy Jones. At peak value, no one was better. If I threw that out, most people would disagree, but
he's in the conversation, Jack. There's no doubt. After he beat Ruiz, he retires. He's in the top 5, maybe top 3.
I could say he was the greatest of all time in that case. And listen, I'm adamant about this. Duran is so charismatic, and such a legendary type fighter. Had he retired after the first Leonard fight, that's it. I'm not fighting again. I'm going to Panama. Screw Leonard. I beat him. I don't have to beat him again. We're having a very serious conversation. Most people who feel Sugar Ray Robinson is pound for pound the greatest, clearly. It's going back and forth. The big debate would be Robinson-Duran, and it would be such a split. But
assuming that Leonard does the same thing he did after Duran, yes. And he never has a win over Duran, but he accomplishes everything he did, that makes Duran look even greater.
If Joe Frazier could not have retired after the first Ali fight and had that extra great status, I'm going to tell you why. Because people would have said 2 things. They would have said he took such a beating he couldn't fight again. That would be one. And 2, Ali never would have backtracked and told the truth that he thought he lost the first Frazier fight. He would have held to the,
that he won.
that he won, and more people would have bought into it because of the Ali.
He was very convincing. He convinced a lot of people as it was.
Yeah, and now the funny thing, like it's like Hagler Leonard. It's 50-50, whoever you speak to, who they think won. Well, we both feel Leonard won the fight. We know Leonard won the fight in all probability. It's all subjective, but it's hard to see a clear path to Hagler winning.
Right.
So many people think Hagler won that fight, Frank. So many people.
Is it because Leonard didn't beat him up? He just outboxed him.
I think most people don't score fights like you and I do. We score fights. I think they watch fights. If you watch a fight as one big fight, one big round,
as if you're watching a movie.
Right, then you can make a good case for Hagler. Look, I was speaking to this lady after the Hagler-Leonard fight. An older lady. She didn't know anything about boxing, but she watched the fight. She saw it on replay the first time. And she says, "Oh, I don't understand how that guy Leonard they could say he was the winner. The other guy was chasing him all fight, going after him. But that's hard from her lens, to see it. But we break it down. We scored round by round, and what could I say with that? Yeah. So,
well, what was I going to say, Jack? Oh, shoot. I forgot what I was going to say.
Madison Square Garden's making a comeback here. I mean, even though the fight June 2nd is Times Square, that's going to be by invitation only, Frank. Anyone looking to attend that show at Times Square, I wouldn't advise they, just show up unless they have an accommodation beforehand. Supposedly, about 300 people are watching it. I put in for media credentials. I might not even get them. I don't know what they're doing. Someone told me some members of the media are going to have to watch it from a building looking down at the ring through a window in an office building.
See, they don't take care. The frustrating thing with boxing, Jack, these days is it's so hard to get a hold of the fight. The older guys like us, I'm not good with the technology. And it's like when there's a good fight and I want to see it, we're willing to pay for it, but it's almost impossible to find. And then like they're being that way about the Madison or the Times Square card. It's like they just don't do anything to help themselves out. I know you wanted to talk about Dana White. Maybe this is a good segue. Maybe he'll change that.
No, I didn't really want to talk about Dana White. I
mean his impact on boxing.
Listen, from my sources and what I hear, okay, the promoters, and this links onto Dana White, are getting a bit edgy about his excellency. They're kind of feeling they're used. Guys like Bob Arum are now saying about Dana White, who's his excellency's main guy, to put on these shows and the pay scale, that what are the UFC fighters going to think Arum's saying when they see the boxers getting paid so much more? I don't know how Dana
I'm not sure it's a good thing. I've had the wait and see mindset, but I'm not convinced Dana White is a plus.
No, it remains to be seen. I mean, I'm not enthusiastic about Dana White coming on board. I saw the pay scale he wants to pay the fighters. Does he really think it's going to get to the point where the Canelos are going to be fighting for $500,000 a fight?
I don't think so.
This is the UFC. Oh, the Dana White's going to think, no, we got to sweeten the pot up to $2 million a fight. And Dana White's not going to be able to get a monopoly on the sport because there are other promoters. They'll be signing fighters. Someone has to develop the fighters, to get to a certain point.
And Jack, people forget, Dana White is the president of UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Challenge or Championship. That's not MMA. That's a section of MMA. It may be the best league of MMA, but it's not total MMA. So he has like a little dictatorship in his own conglomerate. It works for him. They have the best reputation. They supposedly get the best fighters, but boxing doesn't work like that.
No, and I think he's going to find that out because the Eddie Hearns, the Frank Warrens, the Bob Arams, the Al Haymans are going to be kind of working closely together. So there's pushback, and they've got a good number of fighters, and they have those
Right.
fighters on contract. But but they're doing things behind the scenes. I heard with His Excellency to try to kind of get the other fighters to come on board with them away. Which I'm not saying they're doing anything illegal. I'm not saying
No, but
anything
we
illegal.
understand. Look, it's business.
I'm not saying anyone's doing anything unethical. I want to make that
Right.
clear. Okay? I'm not saying anyone's dishonest here, but it's a competitive war going on. It seems that's going to be taking
Jack,
place.
it's a dirty business. We know that. The
Yeah.
only thing that's a dirtier business than professional boxing is politics. That's it. That is the only thing that is cut your throat every second of every day. Boxing is very close to that, but it
But-
doesn't.
but-
It's still second, though.
But New York's making a great comeback in boxing. For example, there's a show in June, good show. Then July 11th, Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano fight at Madison Square Garden. The next night, Turkey is having a show. The venue in New York hasn't been announced. Okay, so he's having one then. So you're talking about back-to-back nights, Friday and Saturday night in the summer. That's pretty cool.
Jack, I'll throw one out at you. Tomorrow is the anniversary of one of the greatest light heavyweight championship fights ever. Can you guess? April 22nd.
Wait, one of the greatest light heavyweight championship fights ever. I don't know the date. I'm just going to guess a great fight. Archie Moore, Yvonne Durrell.
That's one of them. That's not the one. It's the anniversary of
Saad
Muhammad beating Marvin Johnson in the rematch in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
That was 1979. Can you believe that many years have passed? What's that? That was 25. It's just, we're going on what, 47 years? It's just unbelievable.
Kudos
46 years.
Kudos to Marvin Johnson. He insisted on the rematch. He lost to Saad Muhammad. No world title was on the line when he lost to him. And he insisted when he won his sanctioning body title, I think it was WBA, he defended against Saad Muhammad. He insisted, Marvin Johnson, on the rematch,
He said, I will not feel like the champ until I beat Saad Muhammad.
He lost to Johnson. He kind of validated himself to Saad Muhammad. He validated himself as a true champion by taking the fight and fighting a heck of a fight, fighting courageously there, too.
Jack, I don't know how much Marvin Johnson made in his career, but I know this much. He was underpaid.
Yeah, well, Marvin Johnson was an Olympic bronze medalist in 72. And the reason that's a segue very quickly because we're running out of time. The Olympics, they are going to hold it actually in 2028, again in Los Angeles. And I don't know, it doesn't create the buzz the way it used to. Olympics.
And Jack, when it's on at 3:00 in the morning and nobody's up to see it.
Well, you know what it is? It's not on the primary channel. There used to just be ABC with Howard Cosell, and it used to be great, the fights, and now you have to find what channel it's on.
Olympic boxing is really, it's just not on the radar anymore in America, it seems.
No, we had the big personalities. We mentioned Sugar Ray Leonard before, that 76 team. Him, Howard Davis, the Spinks brothers.
Jack, we only have a minute left, but I'm going to give you a guy who fought in the Olympics who I know that you probably liked, and you're going to know what I'm talking about. He never turned pro. I thought he got a bad deal in the quarterfinals, but he was so much fun to watch, but he never turned pro. He became a coach. Remember Jesse Valdez?
Jesse Valdez, I was
from Texas.
We got to talk about next week, bad deal in the Olympics. Like I've been talking to Chuck Walker on the 76 team. The guy who I think he did turn pro, but he never fought for a world title. I thought you were going to mention Laszlo Papp, 3-time Olympic champion. But
Before
yeah,
my time, Jack.
Yeah,
I didn't see, I'm talking about guys I saw fight.
Yeah, okay. Okay, that's it, Frank. Time to wrap up. And
All right,
it's your
Jack.
time.
Good talking to you. Great show. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
You're watching National Streaming Sports. Over 20 podcasts, 70 shows, and a 3.5-star rating on Roku TV.